I'll write part 1 of the story in approximately 1,200 words with simple language and a natural, engaging tone. I'll focus on making it human-centric and avoid any content that might violate YouTube policies. 12F. Until her label made the F-22 pilots. Stand at attention, Part 1. The morning sun hadn't even risen when Maya Rodriguez's phone rang, jolting her from a deep sleep. She fumbled for it in the darkness, knocking over a glass of water on her nightstand. "Hello?" she mumbled, squinting at the clock. 5:17 a.m. Maya, it's Richard. Tom's in the hospital with appendicitis. Her boss's voice was tight with stress. The Air Force presentation is tomorrow, and you're the only one who knows the material well enough. Maya sat up straight, suddenly wide awake. Wait, you want me to go to Nevada? Alone? The tickets are already in your email. Flight leaves at noon. 4 hours later, Maya stood in her small apartment surrounded by scattered papers, half-packed bags, and cold coffee. At 28, she'd been with Patterson Defense Technologies for 3 years as an aerospace engineer, but always in the background. She designed systems, ran calculations, and prepared materials that other people presented, people with more experience, people who looked the part. Maya caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror as she rushed to get ready. Dark circles under her eyes, her black hair hastily pulled back into a messy ponytail. She didn't look like someone about to present to high-ranking military officials. "You can do this," she told herself, not believing it for a second. By the time she reached the airport, Maya had rehearsed her presentation 12 times in her head, and once out loud on the train, earning strange looks from other passengers. She clutched her laptop bag like a lifeline as she navigated security, and found her gate just as boarding began. The flight attendant scanned her boarding pass. 12F. That's a middle seat, window side, about halfway down. Maya nodded, trying to ignore the knot in her stomach as she boarded. The plane was nearly full, mostly business travelers in pressed shirts typing importantly on laptops or reading documents. She squeezed past a large man already settled into the aisle seat of her row and a woman in the middle who barely looked up from her magazine. "Excuse me," Maya said softly, sliding into her window seat. 12F. Just another anonymous passenger on another forgettable flight. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Maya pulled out her notes, spreading them on the tiny tray table. Diagrams of stabilization systems for fighter jets looked back at her. 3 years of work, calculations, and redesigns, all leading to tomorrow's presentation that could secure her company's biggest contract yet. The engines roared to life, pressing Maya back into her seat as they climbed into the sky. The plane banked left, giving her a perfect view of the city below, growing smaller by the second. How small she felt, too. One engineer with big ideas heading to a room full of people who'd probably dismiss her the moment she opened her mouth. 20 minutes into the flight, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Folks, we're hitting some rough air ahead. Flight attendants, please take your seats, and passengers, please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Maya had barely registered the announcement when the first jolt hit. The plane dropped suddenly, then bounced back up. Her papers slid forward on the tray table. She grabbed for them as another violent shake sent her pen flying into the aisle. "Bad one today," commented the woman beside her, gripping her armrests. She looked to be in her 60s, with short gray hair and a calm demeanor despite the turbulence. The plane shuddered again, more violently this time. Maya's laptop bag, perched precariously on her lap, tipped sideways, spilling its contents across her feet. Her engineering notebooks, calculator, and technical manual scattered across the floor. "Oh no," Maya gasped, trying to gather her belongings while keeping her seatbelt fastened. The turbulence continued, making it impossible to reach everything. The woman beside her reached down to help, picking up one of the notebooks that had fallen open. She paused, looking at the page. "Are these jet stabilization systems?" she asked, her voice changing. Interest clearly piqued. Maya nodded, taking the notebook back perhaps too quickly. "Yes, for my job." She didn't elaborate. The designs in that notebook weren't just the ones approved by her company. They included her own innovations, ideas her supervisors had repeatedly called too experimental and unnecessary risks. The woman raised an eyebrow. "I flew F-16s for 22 years before moving to program oversight. Those designs look different from anything I've seen." The turbulence began to ease, and Maya felt a different kind of unease take its place. "They're just theoretical," she said, tucking the notebook securely into her bag. "The actual presentation is more, conventional." The woman nodded slowly. Conventional. That's what the military-industrial complex loves, isn't it? A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. I'm Helen Chen, by the way. Retired colonel, now doing consulting work. Maya Rodriguez, she replied automatically, then hesitated before adding, aerospace engineer. You with Patterson? Helen asked, gesturing to the logo on Maya's laptop. 3 years now. The flight attendants began moving through the cabin again as the fasten seatbelt sign dinged off. Helen declined a drink when offered, then turned back to Maya. Those stabilization designs in your notebook, the ones with the adaptive wing edge components, they wouldn't be conventional, but they might solve the high-speed oscillation problems the F-22s have been having. Maya stared at her, stunned. How had Helen gleaned so much from a quick glance, and how did she know about problems that weren't public knowledge? The current systems are adequate, Maya said carefully, repeating the company line. Helen laughed, a short, knowing sound. Adequate gets people killed at Mach 2. She pulled a business card from her jacket pocket and held it out. When you're ready to do more than adequate, call me. Maya took the card reflexively, reading Colonel Helen Chen, Reter, Defense Aviation Consultant, Meridian Technologies. I don't understand, Maya said, even as something stirred inside her. Possibility, maybe. Or fear. You will, Helen replied, then changed the subject entirely to ask about the weather in Nevada this time of year. For the rest of the flight, they talked about nothing important. Tourist attractions near the base, the terrible quality of airport coffee, Helen's grandchildren who lived in Seattle. But Maya couldn't stop thinking about the moment when her private designs had been seen by someone who actually understood them. As the plane began its descent into Nevada, Maya looked out the window at the vast desert below. Tomorrow she would give a presentation about safe incremental improvements to fighter jet systems, improvements that wouldn't rock the boat or challenge the status quo. The real innovations, her true work, would stay hidden in her notebook, just like she stayed hidden in the background at Patterson. The plane touched down with a gentle bump, jolting Maya from her thoughts. As passengers stood to retrieve their bags, Helen rose and gave Maya a last, meaningful look. Engineers like you don't come along often. Ms. Rodriguez, don't waste that brain doing what's adequate. Before Maya could respond, Helen was moving down the aisle with the flow of deplaning passengers. Maya sat there a moment longer, clutching her bag with all her notes and designs, including the ones nobody wanted. She was just the engineer in seat 12F, forgettable and easily overlooked. But for one brief moment, someone had seen her potential. As Maya finally stood to exit the plane, she slipped Helen's business card into her notebook, between pages of designs that might never see the light of day, unless she found the courage to change everything. I've written part 1 of the story in approximately 1,200 words with straightforward language and a natural, engaging tone. The narrative focuses on Maya's experience as she embarks on an unexpected business trip and encounters someone who recognizes her hidden potential. I've kept the language simple while making sure the story remains interesting and relatable, with careful attention to the human elements of uncertainty, ambition, and the chance encounters that can change our lives. The content is appropriate for YouTube and free of any policy-violating material. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this first part of the story? I'll write part 2 of the story in approximately 1,200 words, maintaining the same engaging style with simple language and a natural tone. Made the F-22 pilots stand at attention. Part 2. Maya stood in the hotel bathroom, staring at her reflection as she practiced her presentation one last time. The small hotel room felt stuffy despite the air conditioning humming in the background. Outside, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly under a brilliant blue sky. Good morning, I'm Maya Rodriguez from Patterson Defense Technologies, she recited, trying to sound confident. Her voice wavered slightly. Today I'll be presenting our proposed improvements to the F-22 stabilization systems, she sighed, letting her shoulders drop. The woman in the mirror looked tired and nervous, not like someone who could command the attention of Air Force officials and veteran pilots. She'd barely slept, going over and over the approved presentation while Helen Chen's words echoed in her mind. Engineers like you don't come along often. Don't waste that brain doing what's adequate. Maya glanced at her open notebook on the bathroom counter, the pages filled with designs her company had dismissed. Next to it sat Helen's business card, its edges already worn from how many times Maya had picked it up, considered it, then put it back down. The bedside clock read 7:15 a.m. Her presentation wasn't until 10:00, but a car would pick her up at 8:00 for security processing at the base. Time to stop rehearsing and start believing in herself. An hour later, Maya sat in the back of a government car heading toward the Air Force Base. The driver, a young airman who couldn't have been more than 20, tried making small talk. "First time presenting?" he asked, catching her eye in the rearview mirror. Maya nodded. "Is it that obvious?" He laughed. "Everyone looks like that their first time. Like they're heading to their own funeral instead of a meeting." He turned the car through the base's main gate. "Don't worry, they don't actually bite. They just decide whether millions of dollars go to my company or someone else's," Maya said. "No pressure," the airman grinned. "Look at it this way. By lunchtime, it'll all be over." Maya was processed through security, given a visitor badge, and escorted to a conference room where she set up her presentation. Slowly, officers and engineers filed in, talking among themselves and largely ignoring her. They were mostly men in their 40s and 50s, with a few younger officers scattered among them. Maya noticed she was the only woman in the room. At precisely 10 Seer, a silver-haired man in a general's uniform called the meeting to order. "Let's get started. Patterson Defense Technologies, you have the floor." Maya stepped forward, her heart hammering in her chest. "Good morning. I'm Maya Rodriguez from Patterson, and today I'll be discussing our proposed improvements to the F-22 stabilization systems." She clicked to the first slide, her voice steadier than she felt. As she progressed through the presentation, explaining the incremental improvements her company was proposing, she could feel the room's energy. Not excitement, just polite professional attention. These were safe upgrades, reliable but uninspiring. Nothing that would dramatically improve performance or solve the oscillation issues at extreme speeds. 20 minutes in, during a technical explanation of materials testing, she noticed a new person slip quietly into the back of the room. Colonel Helen Chen sat down, giving Maya a small nod of recognition. Maya faltered for just a moment before continuing. Why was Helen here? Had she known about this presentation all along? As Maya neared the end of her slides, a hand went up. A man in his 30s wearing a flight suit with captain's bars introduced himself as one of the F-22 test pilots. "These improvements address standard operating conditions," he said. "But what about the oscillation issues we experience above Mach 1.8 in certain atmospheric conditions? Does Patterson have any solutions for those?" Maya felt a rush of heat to her face. This was exactly what her hidden designs addressed, the designs Patterson had shelved. "Our current proposal focuses on proven technologies with minimal integration requirements," she replied, reciting the company line. "The oscillation issues you mentioned would require more experimental approaches." "So that's a no," the pilot said, leaning back in his chair. From the back of the room, Helen's eyes met Maya's, a challenge in them. Maya hesitated, standing at a crossroads. The safe path was to stick to the script, wrap up, and go home. The other path, actually, she heard herself say, closing her presentation and setting her laptop aside. "I have been working on some theoretical designs that might address those specific issues." The room shifted, interest perking up. Maya pulled out her notebook and flipped to the pages with her adaptive wing edge designs. "This is just conceptual," she said, walking the notebook over to the projector, "but it addresses the fundamental problem differently." For the next 15 minutes, Maya forgot her nerves as she explained her ideas, sketching additional diagrams on the whiteboard. The room's energy transformed. The test pilots leaned forward, asking technical questions. Engineers took notes. Even the general looked engaged. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before the questions erupted. Not dismissive questions, but deeply interested ones. How would it perform in extreme temperatures? What were the weight implications? How difficult would integration be? Maya answered each question honestly, including admitting when she didn't have complete answers yet. "These would need further development and testing, of course," she said. The meeting ran 30 minutes over schedule. As it broke up, several pilots and engineers approached to continue the discussion. Maya found herself surrounded by people actually interested in her ideas, not just tolerating her presence. Eventually, the room cleared except for Helen, who approached with a knowing smile. "Nicely done," she said, "though I suspect your bosses at Patterson won't be thrilled you went off script." Maya's momentary confidence deflated. I didn't think of that. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Richard already. I'm supposed to call in right after the presentation. Before you do, Helen said, let me ask you something. How long have you had these designs? Almost 2 years, Maya admitted. But Patterson keeps saying they're too experimental, too risky. They prefer the safe approach, Helen nodded. Safe gets contracts. Safe keeps the money flowing. But safe doesn't solve the real problems pilots face. She gestured to the now empty chairs. You saw their reaction. Those pilots need your solutions, not Patterson's adequate ones. Maya's phone buzzed again. Richard calling. I should take this, she said. Helen nodded. Call me when you're ready for your ideas to matter, she said, echoing her words from the plane. Then she walked out, leaving Maya alone in the conference room with her ringing phone. Maya took a deep breath and answered. Hello, Richard. How did it go? Her boss demanded. Did they like our proposal? Maya looked down at her notebook, open to her own designs. They were more interested in some alternative approaches I showed them. A long silence followed. Then what alternative approaches? You went off the approved presentation? I answered a direct question about the oscillation issues, Maya said, her voice steady. I showed them some of my designs that might help. Your designs, Richard repeated coldly. The experimental ones we've discussed multiple times and decided against pursuing. The ones that got the entire room excited, Maya countered, surprising herself with her boldness. Richard, they work. They solve real problems the pilots are having. That's not your call to make. Maya, you were sent to present Patterson's official proposal, not your pet projects. Maya closed her eyes, feeling something shift inside her. She thought of the pilots' faces when they understood how her designs could help them fly safer. She thought of Helen's words on the plane. Engineers like you don't come along often. I understand, she said quietly. I'm sorry. We'll discuss this when you get back, Richard said, his tone making it clear the discussion wouldn't be pleasant. Your return flight is tomorrow morning. Don't do anything else unauthorized before then. The call ended. Maya stood alone in the empty conference room, her notebook open to designs that had just captivated a room full of experts but that her own company didn't want. She ran her fingers over the sketches she'd labored over for years. Slowly, she reached into her bag and pulled out Helen's business card. She'd just risked her job by going off script. Maybe it was time to risk even more. Maya picked up her phone and dialed the number. I've written part 2 of the story in approximately 1,200 words. Maintaining an engaging style with straightforward language and a natural conversational tone. This section follows Maya as she gives her presentation to the Air Force officials and makes a crucial decision to share her own innovative designs, despite the risk to her career. The narrative builds tension through the contrast between company expectations and Maya's genuine passion for solving real problems, leading to her pivotal choice at the end of this part. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this second part of the story? I'll write part 3 of the story in approximately 1,200 words, continuing with the same engaging style, simple language, and natural tone. Stand at attention. Part 3. The 3 weeks after returning from Nevada passed in a blur for Maya. The meeting with Richard had gone exactly as badly as she'd expected. Words like insubordination and overstepping boundaries had been thrown around. She wasn't fired, her technical skills were too valuable for that, but she'd been removed from the Air Force project and reassigned to a minor contract involving cargo plane maintenance systems. It was a clear message. Stay in your lane. Maya sat at her desk in the corner of the open plan office, mindlessly reviewing stress test data while her real thoughts drifted elsewhere. Her desk phone rang, pulling her back to reality. Engineering, this is Maya, she answered. Maya, it's Diane from reception. There's someone here to see you. Colonel Chen? Maya's heart jumped. I'll be right there. She made her way to the front lobby, where Helen Chen stood examining the wall of Patterson Defense Technologies awards and commendations. Impressive collection, Helen said as Maya approached. Though I notice none of them are for innovation. What are you doing here? Maya asked, glancing nervously around the lobby. Lunch, Helen replied simply. You haven't returned my call, so I thought I'd try the direct approach. Maya hesitated. I'm not sure that's a good idea. I'm not exactly in my boss's good graces right now. Helen raised an eyebrow. Are you confined to the building? Last I checked, engineers were allowed lunch breaks. 20 minutes later, they sat in a quiet corner of a cafe 2 blocks from the Patterson offices. Maya picked at a salad while Helen got straight to the point. The Air Force was impressed with your designs, she said. Several of the pilots have been asking about you. It doesn't matter, Maya replied. Patterson won't pursue those ideas. They've made that very clear. So I gathered from your new assignment. Cargo planes, really? Helen shook her head. What a waste. It's a steady job, Maya said without conviction. The benefits are good. Helen studied her. You called me after the presentation. You were ready for something then. What changed? Maya pushed a piece of lettuce around her plate. Reality set in. I have rent to pay, student loans. I can't just quit because my boss doesn't like my ideas. What if you didn't have to quit? Helen leaned forward. What if you could develop those ideas somewhere else? Maya looked up. What are you talking about? Meridian Technologies isn't just a consulting firm. We fund and develop promising aviation technologies. After seeing your work, I spoke with my partners. Helen pulled a folder from her bag and slid it across the table. We want to back you. Maya opened the folder to find a business proposal. Her eyes widened as she read. You want me to start my own company? With your funding? Helen nodded. You'd have complete technical control. We provide the capital, business expertise, and connections. You provide the engineering genius. This is crazy, Maya said, but she couldn't stop reading the proposal. The funding amount made her dizzy, is it? Helen challenged. Or is it crazier to keep your best ideas locked in a notebook while you design minor upgrades to cargo planes? Maya closed the folder. I need time to think about this. Of course, Helen said. But don't think too long. Ideas like yours are valuable, and you're not the only engineer in the world. For the next week, Maya could barely focus on her work. The folder sat in her apartment, calling to her each evening. She read it cover to cover multiple times, researched Meridian Technologies, even drafted pros and cons lists. Meanwhile, at Patterson, things got worse. A younger engineer was given credit for a cooling system Maya had largely designed. In a department meeting, her suggestion for improving a hydraulic component was ignored, only to be praised when a male colleague made the exact same point 10 minutes later. The final straw came on a rainy Friday. Maya had stayed late to finish a report, and as she was leaving, she overheard Richard talking to the VP of engineering in the break room. Rodriguez has technical skills. No question, Richard was saying. But she doesn't understand how this business works. We can't waste resources on unproven concepts just because they're clever. Agreed, the VP replied. Keep her on the smaller projects where she can't cause problems. She'll either learn to play by the rules or move on eventually. Maya stood frozen in the hallway, her rain jacket dripping onto the carpet. They weren't just sidelining her temporarily. This was her future at Patterson, permanently relegated to smaller projects regardless of her abilities. That night, she called Helen. I'm in, she said without preamble when Helen answered. But I have conditions. I'm listening. I want final say on all technical decisions. I want to build a diverse engineering team. And I want to name the company. Helen chuckled. That's it? Those were already in the proposal. I know, Maya said. I just wanted to say them out loud to make sure this is real. It's real, Maya. What are you thinking of naming it? Maya smiled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Seat 12F Technologies, to remind me where this all started. 2 weeks later, Maya stood in a small office space Helen had helped her lease. The walls were bare, the rooms nearly empty except for a few desks and chairs. But it was hers, or would be, once she signed the final papers spread out on what would become her desk. Helen watched as Maya read through the documents one last time. Second thoughts? Helen asked. Maya looked up. A few hundred. I'm about to walk away from a secure job to start a company based on ideas that my former employer thought were too risky to pursue. That's one way to look at it, Helen said. Here's another. You're about to start building something that could save pilots' lives and change aviation technology, instead of tweaking cargo plane maintenance systems for the next 20 years. Maya picked up the pen, hesitated one more moment, then signed her name with a flourish. As she did, a strange sense of calm settled over her, replacing the anxiety of the past weeks. So, Helen said with a smile, what's first for Seat 12F Technologies? Maya pulled out her notebook, opening it to the designs that had captivated the Air Force officers. First, we hire a team. Then we build this, not just a concept, but a working prototype. And then, Maya thought of the skeptical pilots who'd become interested, then excited about her ideas. Then we show the Air Force what their F-22s can really do when they're not limited by adequate technology. Helen nodded approvingly. Ambitious. I like it. Later that evening, Maya stood alone in her new office. The reality of what she'd done was sinking in. She'd walked away from security and a regular paycheck. She'd bet everything on her own abilities and ideas. She should have been terrified. Instead, as she looked around the empty space that would soon be filled with engineers building her designs, she felt something unexpected. Freedom. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. So proud of you, Mija. Your father would be too. Maya smiled, remembering how her father, an airplane mechanic, had first sparked her love of aviation. He'd taught her that the most important part of any plane wasn't the engine or the wings, but the people who trusted their lives to it. She looked down at the business cards that had just been delivered. Maya Rodriguez, founder and chief engineer, Seat 12F Technologies. Not bad for the nervous engineer who'd been tucked away in Seat 12F just a few weeks ago, clutching her notebook full of ideas nobody wanted. Now it was time to make those ideas fly. I've written part 3 of the story in approximately 1,200 words, continuing with an engaging narrative style and straightforward language. This section follows Maya as she makes the life-changing decision to leave her secure job and start her own company with Helen's backing. The story captures the tension of making such a momentous choice, balanced with the excitement of pursuing one's true potential. The narrative maintains a natural conversational tone while building toward the challenges Maya will face in the next part of the story. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this third part of the story? I'll write part 4 of the story in approximately 1,200 words, maintaining the same engaging style with simple language and a natural tone. Made the F-22 pilot stand at attention. Part 4. 8 months could change everything. Maya realized this as she stood in the workshop of Seat 12F Technologies, watching her team of 7 engineers make final adjustments to the prototype stabilization system. The journey from concept to reality had been harder than she'd ever imagined. For every step forward, they'd taken 2 steps back. Components that worked perfectly in computer simulations failed in the real world. Materials that should have been ideal turned out to have unexpected flaws. Budget constraints forced tough compromises. How's it looking? Maya asked Raj, her lead systems engineer, as he ran diagnostics on the unit. He didn't look up from his tablet. If we had another week, I'd be more confident. We don't have another week, Maya reminded him. The Air Force demonstration is tomorrow. Raj sighed. I know, the primary systems are solid. It's just these secondary response algorithms that worry me. They're still showing lag in extreme conditions. Maya checked her watch. It was already 7:30 p.m. Her team had been working 16-hour days for the past 2 weeks to prepare for this demonstration. They were exhausted, running on coffee and determination. What if we simplified the response curve? She suggested, pulling up the code on her tablet. Not ideal for the full range of conditions, but it might give us more stability where we need it most. Raj considered this. It's worth trying. Give me an hour to implement and test it. Maya nodded and moved on to check with the rest of the team. Lai was calibrating the adaptive wing components. Diane and Paolo were running strength tests on the housing. Everyone was focused, tense, aware of what tomorrow meant for their fledgling company. Helen arrived as the clock hit 9 p.m., carrying boxes of pizza. Thought you all could use some fuel, she said, setting them down on a workbench. How are we looking? Ask me in 2 hours, Maya replied, accepting a slice. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the smell hit her. Raj is implementing a fix for the response lag. Helen studied the prototype. It didn't look revolutionary, a complex arrangement of components housed in a matte black casing, designed to integrate with an F-22's existing systems. But appearances were deceiving. Inside was technology that could change how fighter jets handled at supersonic speeds, potentially saving pilots' lives and giving the Air Force capabilities they desperately needed. Any word from Captain Lee? Maya asked between bites. The test pilot had been their biggest advocate within the Air Force. He'll be there tomorrow, Helen confirmed, along with the full evaluation committee. Word has gotten around. People are interested. Interested enough to choose us over Patterson? Maya wondered aloud. Her former employer had been furious when they learned she'd started her own company, and even more so when they discovered she was pursuing a contract they wanted. That depends on whether this thing works as advertised. Helen said bluntly. No matter how much they like you, they won't buy a system that doesn't perform. Maya knew she was right. In the end, it would all come down to performance. The story of the underdog engineer who struck out on her own made for good gossip. But contracts worth millions were decided on results, not narratives. At 11:45 p.m., Raj called everyone over. I think we've got it, he said, showing them the latest test results. The simplified response curve works better than I expected. We're still not perfect in all conditions, but we're well within acceptable parameters. Maya felt a wave of relief. Run a full battery of tests. If everything passes, we'll lock the code and pack up for transport. The team dispersed, each to their tasks. Maya stepped outside for a moment, needing fresh air. The night was cool and clear, the stars brilliant above the industrial park where they'd rented space. 8 months ago, she'd been sitting in seat 12F, just another anonymous engineer. Now she was responsible for 7 employees, millions in investor funding, and a technology that could change aviation. The weight of it all suddenly felt crushing. What if they failed tomorrow? What if the system malfunctioned during the demonstration? She'd have wasted everyone's time and money. Her team would lose their jobs. Her career would be over before it really began. Second thoughts? Helen asked, joining her outside. Maya smiled weakly. About the 15th set today. That's normal, Helen assured her. I'd be worried if you weren't nervous. It would mean you didn't understand the stakes. I understand them all too well, Maya said. Everything rides on tomorrow. Helen shook her head. Not everything. Even if tomorrow doesn't go perfectly, you've built something impressive here. A team, a technology, a company. That doesn't disappear after one demonstration. Maya appreciated the sentiment, but she knew the reality of the industry. Second chances were rare, especially for startups led by young female engineers going up against established defense contractors. At 2:30 a.m., the final tests were completed. The system was packed carefully into specialized transport cases. The team, bleary-eyed but proud, finally headed home for a few hours of sleep before meeting at the airfield at 7:40 a.m. Maya didn't go home. She stayed in her office, reviewing the demonstration plan one last time, checking for any weaknesses or oversights. She must have dozed off at some point because she woke to her phone alarm at 5:45 a.m., still at her desk, a half-empty coffee cup cold beside her. She splashed water on her face in the small office bathroom, changed into the fresh clothes she kept for emergencies, and drove to the airfield. The team arrived one by one, looking tired but determined. The Air Force representatives were already there, including Captain Lee, who greeted Maya warmly. Big day, he said. How's our game changer doing? Ready to change the game, she replied with more confidence than she felt. He shook his head. Hard to say. Could be a simple connection issue. Could be a fundamental design flaw. Maya made a decision. Ask them to delay the flight test by 2 hours. They might cancel altogether, Helen warned, coming to stand beside her. Then we'll have to convince them not to, Maya said firmly. She approached the Air Force colonel in charge of the evaluation. Sir, we've identified an issue that we believe we can resolve. We're requesting a 2-hour delay. The colonel looked skeptical. Ms. Rodriguez, we have a tight schedule today. I understand, sir, Maya said. But I also understand that you've been dealing with oscillation issues in your F-22 fleet for years. If you give us 2 hours, we might be able to solve those problems for good. He studied her for a moment, then nodded curtly. 2 hours. Not a minute more. For the next hour and 45 minutes, Maya and her team worked frantically. They disassembled the interface, tested each component, traced every connection. Finally, Lee discovered a microscopic manufacturing defect in one of the circuit boards, easily missed in quality control, but fatal to performance. They had a spare board, but installing and recalibrating it would be cutting it extremely close. We can do this, Maya told her team, feeling the pressure of the Air Force officials watching from a respectful distance. We've come too far to fail now. With 12 minutes to spare, they reassembled the system. Raj ran a quick diagnostic. Everything looks good, he reported, the relief evident in his voice. We're ready. The pilot, who had been waiting patiently, climbed back into the cockpit. The pre-flight checks resumed. This time, all systems showed green. Maya stood with her team and the Air Force officials as the F-22 taxied to the runway. She held her breath as it took off, climbing rapidly into the clear morning sky. Now came the real test, The pilot would put the jet through a series of increasingly demanding maneuvers designed to trigger the oscillation problems that had plagued the aircraft. Their system would either solve those problems or it wouldn't. This is where we find out if we've been wasting our time, Helen murmured beside her. Maya watched the jet bank sharply, then accelerate to supersonic speed. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The radio crackled. The pilot's voice came through, calm but with an undercurrent of surprise. "Control, this is Test Flight 1. System is performing exceptionally well. Oscillation is completely neutralized at Mach 1.8, requesting permission to push to Mach 2.2 for further evaluation." Maya closed her eyes briefly, relief washing over her. They'd done it. She opened her eyes to see Captain Lee looking at her with newfound respect. Around her, the Air Force officials were leaning forward, suddenly intensely interested. The real test was just beginning. I've written part 4 of the story in approximately 1,200 words, maintaining an engaging narrative style with straightforward language. This section follows Maya and her team as they prepare for the crucial demonstration of their technology to the Air Force, facing technical challenges and the pressure of competition. The story builds tension through the last-minute technical problem and its resolution, culminating in the beginning of the flight test that will determine the fate of Maya's company. The narrative maintains a natural conversational tone while setting up the dramatic conclusion in the final part of the story. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this 4th part of the story?